I used to always try to figure out like what is the root issue. There has to be some root issue, and if I figure that out, then I can just cure it, and
Yep.
it's just not that simple.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Pickles and Vodka, the unfiltered mental health podcast where imperfect people have imperfect conversations. I'm Christina, your host. And first of all, it's Monday that I'm recording this intro, which is super weird for me. I usually record them on Sundays and then I release the episode Monday morning, but today's episode is a little bit late because I passed out last night super hard without meaning to, and I guess my body needed more sleep than I've been giving it. Not that that's a hot take or anything. But yeah, it's Monday morning. It is actually my last Monday morning in Seattle, which is super weird to think about because I felt like time was just like stretching on earlier, and now that it's here, I don't know how it got here so fast. And I feel like there's still so much I have to do this week. I still need to sell a lot of furniture and stuff. I need to donate a bunch of stuff. My sister Bonnie is flying in on Friday, and she will help me with some of that. And then Saturday, we're going to pick up my rental car. And then Sunday is when we actually drive out. It's really, really exciting. I'm so ready to be out of here, if I'm being honest. I've mentioned it many times before on the podcast, but Seattle hasn't been very kind to me. I mean, okay, I'm trying to reframe that. Seattle has been good for me in lots of ways. In terms of growth, I've definitely done a lot of growing here, probably more than I wanted to do. I've met so many amazing people that I know I'll stay in touch with forever. And I mean, it was just, I was talking to some friends of mine who moved here at the same time I did in November of 18, around that time. And we were talking about how even though we hadn't been in Seattle for very long, just like 3 years, we've all experienced so many historical events here. For instance, there was a huge snowstorm when we first moved here, record-breaking. And then, of course, there was COVID. And then earlier this summer, we broke the record for a heat wave in Seattle. It was 108 degrees, which is crazy because I think the last time those temperatures were recorded was like a long ass time ago. I don't exactly know when, but the point is these kind of experiences really bring people together. And I think they could kind of accelerate connection, not just with the people that you experience these things with, but also with the place. I feel like even though I haven't lived here very long, I will always have a connection to Seattle just because of the crazy shit that I went through. I mean, it's pretty wild. So, and I know it's been hard. And I came close to giving up a few times, but I'm so happy that I pulled through because I really do feel like a better person having, like, my cat's in the bathroom and he's, like, scratching on something. I have to put him in there now whenever I'm recording or else he will go crazy. So yeah, a lot of crazy thoughts floating around in my mind today, a lot of crazy feelings. I'm really excited for you to hear this episode. I interview my friend Becca, who is a very powerful writer. She has an Instagram account called Red's 2 a.m. Thoughts, where she writes 2 a.m. thoughts. But they're very profound. They cover a wide range of topics such as trauma, abuse, addiction, maladaptive daydreaming, medication, misdiagnoses, like all this stuff. Oh, my cat. I wonder if you guys can hear him through the mic. So I interviewed her actually kind of right after she made a really crazy discovery. We recorded once like last week, and then the audio wasn't usable, so we recorded again, and so much had changed in between recordings with her. And so I'm really excited for you all to hear what she has to say. And like I said last week, this is going to be the last episode for a while. I am taking a short break from the podcast while I move. The last time I did the cross-country move, I published episodes on the road, and it was kind of stressful. So that's not going to happen this time. However, I am still interviewing people. I have a lot of great episodes planned for when the podcast comes back, probably September. I'm shooting for the first week of September to come back because I can't stay away for that long. I love you guys. So, like I said, just processing everything that's happened and that will happen and is happening, honestly. My mental health has been worse, but it's also been better. I feel like the standard for good is very low for me. Like, if I wake up and I take all my meds and I eat a good breakfast and I clean and I come to work like on time, like that's a good morning for me. Like that, I'm doing great. But, I'm still struggling. I don't want to talk about the bulimia too much because the whole last episode was kind of unofficially dedicated toward that. But it's something I'm struggling with every day, and I'm excited to be closer to family in Virginia so I can have more support and more accountability because that's honestly what I need right now. Yesterday, actually, I got to see one of my good friends from treatment, and it was just such a joy. We were really close when we were in residential together. We would watch This Is Us on her laptop in the hallway, and it was my first time watching This Is Us, and so when I got out before she did, I just came home and like immediately watched all of the seasons together. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of her. She's worked insanely hard to get where she is, and yeah, I just have met so many great people through treatment or through interviewing them for this podcast. Like I've said it before and I'll say it again, like fucked up people are truly the nicest people. Not just the nicest, but like the most inspiring, the strongest, the most talented. Like, it's kind of shocking how talented people with mental illnesses are, and it's also sad that their mental illness takes away a lot of ambition and energy and time. Like sometimes I wonder what I would be doing right now if I didn't have these debilitating mental illnesses. Like, I don't know. It's pointless to think what if, but I still do it. I am gonna go ahead and jump right into the interview because I have a lot to do this morning and you all are probably tired of hearing my voice ramble. As always, if you want to say hi, you can just send me a DM on Instagram or email me at picklesandvodkapodcast@gmail.com. If you have any interest in being on the show in September, because I will be rounding up some new guests, and there's a lot of topics I want to cover. I'll post more about that later, but I love you all, and I hope you're having a great week. Also, no, I almost said it's going to be August when this comes out, but it's not. I swear I don't know what day it is. Yeah, whatever month it is. I hope you all enjoy. I hate how they say recording in progress in that really scary voice now.
Yeah.
They didn't used to do that. And now I just feel like I'm traumatizing my guests.
You're fine. I'm used to it. I'm on Zoom all the time. So
Used to speaking in public or used to being traumatized?
just being on Zoom and people like pressing record by accident or whatever.
Oh,
So
that's the boring answer.
yeah. Well, I'm used to being traumatized too, but
People come here for humor, obviously.
yeah.
Oh my God, speaking of humor, I put my kitten in the bathroom and so he wouldn't be able to fuck everything up. And I'm starting to regret it because I'm hearing a lot of noise in there. And I realized like, so I'm moving next week. So a lot of my stuff is just in the bathroom. Like all my art is in there. All my toiletries are in there.
Oh
So he's
no.
just like, I'll probably walk in after this and find like Q-tips all over the floor. It's fine.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, you have a dog, right?
Yeah, I do. Her name is Layla.
She's so
She
beautiful.
is, thank you. Yeah, she's I think like a year and 4 months. So
Oh my
she's
goodness.
still a puppy.
Got that puppy energy.
Yep, and
This
she's in.
picture, this profile picture of you, she's just staring into the camera like,
Oh yeah, she always just stares into your soul and
yeah,
tries to
she's got these
manipulate you.
icy blue eyes.
Yeah, and she knows how to use them too. So,
Well, hello. Welcome back to Pickles and Vodka for the second time. Um, yeah, we had some technical difficulties last time, but luckily you're chill about it. And
yeah.
yeah, so now the second time around, you know all the secrets, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I was kind of glad that you asked because I'm like, I was thinking about it. I was like, like my views are like kind of changing constantly. I feel like I'm kind of going through like a growth spurt, like mentally right now. So it's like, I was just like, this will probably be good. So,
Well, that's
um,
awesome. I'll definitely ask you about that. But first, can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
okay, my name is Becca. I have an IG account, which we'll probably be talking about. It's called Red's 2 a.m. Thoughts. I'm about to turn 25 on Sunday, so
Oh my
that's
God.
cool, I guess.
Literally,
Yeah.
the only thing I can remember from the last time we recorded is that we both had July birthdays.
Yep.
Happy birthday, early birthday.
Thank you.
But yeah, have been, you've been struggling with mental health pretty much forever. But
Yeah, pretty much.
how long have you been talking about it?
Good question. Like, I feel like it's just been an on and off kind of thing. Like, I feel like this is kind of like the first time in my life, like the past maybe like 5 or 6 months, where I've really been like pretty like more raw about my mental health. I think it's like really easy to kind of pick and choose what you want to share, obviously, which is okay. But it's like, I feel like I'm kind of at a point where I'm just like, I don't really give a fuck what anyone thinks. This is what's
Exactly.
going on.
Yes,
So,
that's a beautiful place to get to.
yeah.
So tell me about your Instagram then. Red's 2 a.m. thoughts. Like, how long have you been publishing there, and like, what do you use it for?
Well, like I think it's been about like 2 or 3 months. I'm not totally sure. But I basically just wanted to create an account because it's like a separate account because my main account, it's like I have like 400 followers. I don't know who most of them are, and I just want a place to kind of share like deep thoughts or my experiences with mental health, and I just wanted a separate account where people who are actually interested in that can follow it, and I don't just want to like dump it on a bunch of random people. So that's kind of where it all started, and I think it's been cool because it's like I've been pretty open and vulnerable in a lot of posts, and then people will like DM me and say like, "Hey, like that made me feel a lot better because I'm going through the same shit and I kind of thought I was alone." And I think that was like a big part of why I wanted to create it, was because I just feel like I don't have a lot to give right now aside from my own experiences, and I feel like that can benefit other people in some way or another.
Oh my God,
So
totally. I
yeah.
mean, personally, I love reading your thoughts on there, and you just have such a powerful voice and like a raw honesty. So, have you always been a writer?
Pretty much. Like I've always liked, I feel like it's the one thing I've always felt kind of good at, or at least other people are like, you're a good writer. And so I, feel a little bit more confident in that. But yeah, I've always loved journaling. And I think, I kind of struggle with creative writing, but I've always, given it a shot. Like I've taken a few creative writing classes and stuff like that. But yeah, I think generally the short answer is yeah, I've always been a writer. So
And what was your family like growing up in terms of mental health? Like, did they talk about it at all, or like, were you always kind of writing about these personal things?
Not really until recently. I think I just didn't really know how to process any of it for a long time. And so now I'm just more confident in my own perspective about it. Whereas before it's kind of like I think I was still in this mindset where I felt like I couldn't talk about my family. I needed to, hide it for their own dignity or whatever. And now I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, no, I'm just gonna, share, my story. And a big part of it is, my family growing up. And I think I'm kind of coming to terms with how, that has impacted me mental health wise and stuff like that. And um, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that today, actually. So it's cool that you asked. But
Yeah. What have you been thinking about specifically, or like, what would you like to talk about today?
I don't know, like there's a lot, I guess. I mean, we'll just kind of see how it flows. But
I know that's
like
the
I
most
think,
broad question ever.
yeah, like I think I've been, because I wrote this post recently. My most recent post was about how I've been dealing with a misdiagnosis and for like the past 5 years, where um I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, and I just never really felt like I identified with it. But I think, during the past 5 years, I've also struggled a lot with, substance abuse and alcoholism and stuff like
Mm.
that. So I just mentally wasn't really in the place to even kind of consider that. I don't know, like that I might be dealing with a misdiagnosis. Like I think I
Yeah.
just kind of like, and that's kind of where like I'm gonna sound all over the place, but
Hey, that's
you
okay.
know, I think like maybe in my head I kind of felt like, hey, like I'm taking a pill for my mood issues, so I'm kind of in charge of my mental health. Like I'm kind of doing well. Like it kind of created this like illusion that, um I was taking care of myself or some shit like that. I don't know. But
Yeah.
that's where like I kind of have thought, about growing up, kind of how with my mom, like my dad didn't really struggle with mental health as much. I mean, he was an alcoholic, but I think he didn't really have, like a mood disorder or anything like that. He was pretty normal. But with my mom, like she always struggled with like depression and like kind of rage and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
from an early age, she took antidepressants, and she kind of gave off this like sent this message to me as a kid that um her depression was like kind of completely out of her control. It was a chemical imbalance, and she had to, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess like I just kind of had it in my head for a long time that like depression was just this chemical imbalance that's, or like really any issue that you're dealing with is like, totally outside of your control, and you
Hmm.
just have to take like, medication for it, and that's going to make everything better or whatever. And like my mom growing up didn't really, she wasn't willing to go to therapy or, seek outside help. And
Yeah.
I think I that kind of um I don't know, like
It
I think I
sounds like,
just,
sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
no, you're good.
It sounds like you're growing up without much, you don't know what's going on because you're a kid. And it sounds like
Yeah.
the authority figures in your life didn't really, they either didn't know what was going on or they gave you wrong information. Maybe a little bit of both. I'm not trying to blame anyone. It's just
Yeah.
not everyone knows what's going on, but that's really hard when you're a kid and you're like, I need a role model. I need to know what's going on with my mental state.
Mhm.
And you see, your parents struggling, and then you get this wrong diagnosis. And I can imagine how frustrating and lost that would make you feel.
Yeah, and like, my mom also, even though she took these antidepressants and kind of said, this is how I'm taking charge of my mental health or whatever. Like she also, abused a lot of other things. She was a chronic pothead. She eventually became an alcoholic like later in life, and she like became a really hardcore alcoholic, and she abused a bunch of pills growing up. So it's just like I think I kind of got this message as well that if I wasn't feeling very good, if I was feeling sad or angry, or even if I was feeling happy, that I could always, change how I felt with a substance.
Yeah.
Like I just never really learned how to sit with my emotions and deal with them.
Ugh, that's hard.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I
And
don't
I'm not
know. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, and I'm not totally like blaming my parents. Like I truly believe that, even had I grown up in like a great home environment, like I don't really I wouldn't be surprised if I still ended up being, struggling with addiction. I think
Yeah.
it's just kind of how I'm wired.
I
But
kind of struggle with the like I keep going back and forth between like the nature versus nurture argument. Like I
mhm.
totally believe that people have genetic um factors that have to do with whether they are an addict or
Yeah.
not. But obviously that's not all there is to it. And it is hard to think, I mean, I try not to think of what if, because then you can just go down a deep, dark rabbit hole of what if I was raised this way? What if this hadn't happened? What
Mhm.
if this had happened? It's like, it's so pointless.
Yeah, it is. Or like, I mean, even, I used to think that too, or like, I don't know, I used to try to overcomplicate a lot of things and try to figure out, I don't know, like even say with my eating disorder, I used to always try to figure out like what is the root issue. There has to be some root issue. And if I figure that out, then I can just cure it, and
Yep.
it's just not that simple. And but also it's like I would overcomplicate things too, and
Hmm.
I don't really care if it's nature or nurture or not. Like I don't know. Like
Exactly.
I really just don't know. Like I all I know is that, you know, my life played out the way that it has, and
Yeah. Would you consider yourself to be a black and white thinker?
not really. I
Okay.
I honestly don't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I am, and I don't even realize it. Like I've always kind of considered myself more of a gray thinker. Like I tend to like hate people, not hate people, but I don't really like when people have really polarized views,
Hmm.
which pretty much everyone does. But like this day and age. But like I like to kind of be in the middle of things. Like I don't know. Like I just
That's healthy, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot more people are like that than I've realized like a lot more people are actually like that. They just don't really speak up as much from my own experience.
Did you feel like you couldn't speak up a lot growing up?
Not really.
You feel like you had a voice, or you people asked your opinion on
Oh,
stuff, or
oh no, I meant like I didn't really feel like I could.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't really feel heard growing up. I
Mm.
think, especially just because my parents were dealing with their own shit, I just didn't feel comfortable. I mean, it seems like whenever I did open up, they kind of pulled the whole like, oh, well, I had it worse growing up, and this is supposed to make you feel better about your life and feel more grateful. But
I want to talk about your mental growth spurt, but first, I kind of want to back it up a little and talk about your eating disorder and when it started. Do you
mhm.
want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I feel like my eating disorder started kind of when I was more of a kid. Like I think probably around the time I hit puberty, which was around like 8 or 9 years old. And I basically struggled with like binge eating disorder, and I didn't realize it at the time. I don't know if maybe that's the right way to put it, but because I really had no concept of calories, or like I just didn't really care, but I definitely used food to kind of fill in a hole, like just to
Yeah.
kind of to feel better.
It's really hard for me to not keep talking because I can relate to so much of what you're saying. I
Yeah.
mean, my mom had chemical dependency issues too, and I I noticed now that I did turn to binge eating for comfort.
Mhm.
A lot of my current struggles do stem from that, but yeah, I can relate.
Yeah. And so like I ended up being just really I was always kind of like the most overweight kid in the class, for a long time. And when I was around, I think it was maybe 14 or 15, I had a suicide attempt, and I think it just really traumatized me. I never told anyone about it. I was never hospitalized for it.
Damn, what happened?
Well, I overdosed on aspirin and I got really, really sick for like about a week. And I didn't go to school for about 3 days, 3 or 4 days. My mom was pissed at me because I missed school a lot. So I had truancy issues. And
Mm.
so I don't know, like I was really quiet about it for like
What,
over a decade.
what was happening mentally at the time to make you consider that as an option?
I think like I just had a really bad home life and a really bad life at school. And I just did not feel like I could ever really succeed, I guess. Like, I'm not totally sure what my thought process was at the time, but I just felt really hopeless. And so, I don't know, I just felt like it wouldn't really make a difference whether I was there or not. And
Mm.
so after the whole suicide attempt, I went on this self-improvement kick. Like I remember I stepped on the scale like, maybe 6 months later and I had lost pounds. And I was like, oh, like I barely tried. Like if I can lose pounds without like trying, like how much can I lose if I actually try?
Yeah,
And at the time I was like I think I was probably like obese. Not that like it really matters, but
yeah.
so over the course of like a year and a half or so, I ended up losing a lot of weight and I just
Mm.
could not stop. It almost kind of felt like an addiction in a way where I just
Yeah.
became my way of dealing with shit. So eventually I was like severely underweight within like a year and a half or so. And I remember, coming back one summer, I think it was my junior year, and all of the teachers and a lot of the students were kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is she? Something's very wrong.
Yeah, like what happened?
Well, they tried to like apparently like I later found out from my school counselor that like I think around like 8 people had gone to her within the first 2 weeks of school starting and was like, she needs help, something's wrong. And so she tried to contact my parents and talk to them about it, and they didn't really, they were kind of in denial. And a few of my teachers tried to contact my parents, and they were just saying, she's fine, she eats a lot of vegetables, she eats, it's all okay. And I just kept losing more weight, and my parents really just had no idea what to do.
How did
um
that feel to have friends of yours, or maybe I don't know if they were friends or not, but how did it feel to have other people talk about you behind your back?
um I think it was a little bit perplexing in a way, just because like I mean,
Did you see yourself as having an eating disorder?
it took me a while to come to terms with it. Like I was definitely in denial about it too for a long time. I mean, I can see why it would have been hard to just tell me to like come to me, and tell me to my face, like, hey, I mean, I don't know if it would have been hard to just say, I'm concerned about you. I don't know why everyone had to run to the school counselor, but
Yeah, it's
like
complicated.
it is. So I don't really hold any like resentment towards anyone for it. I think I did have this weird moment one day after school where I was sitting on my bed, and where I think I was sitting on the floor, and I was like doing my little exercises that I did. And then I got up and I looked in the mirror, and it's like I noticed that like my face was getting really gaunt.
Hmm.
And like I had just never seen it like that before. It was always, I always kind of was described as having like a chubby face and chubby cheeks and blah, blah, blah. And it's like suddenly my face was just, it looked like it was like caving in. And I started to kind of feel like a little bit scared. And I hadn't gotten my period in over a year. And I remember going into my sister's bedroom and I told her, hey, like I I'm afraid to not lose weight. And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I was just like, I just don't know how to stop." And she was trying to be reassuring. I think she wasn't really sure how to handle it. She was just kind of like, it's okay to eat food, like, it's good for you to eat like proteins and fats, and like, you need it, you're like growing and stuff. And I think, it was just all happening so fast that people just no one knew how to deal with it. And I live in Kentucky where like there really aren't any like eating disorder clinics or anything around
Mm-hmm.
here, at least not at the time. And I still don't think there are, but I don't feel like it's maybe as common here.
Or at least people don't talk about it.
Yeah, that too. It's not like kind of in California where there's like a bunch of them and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is our like modern day perception of, but it is interesting. Like eating disorders have always existed in all sorts of societies, but
Hmm.
every society kind of likes to think they invented it, or at least that's the
Yeah.
impression I get. Like everyone with an eating, like okay, in my experience, I don't want to generalize. I feel like, oh, I'm the first one to feel this way. I'm the first one to go through this. No one else can understand. I mean, I felt like that as a teen, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that feeling. But the
Yeah.
fact is, no one talks about it.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, we always assume, well, if they're not underweight, then there must not be an issue. That's always kind of
Yeah.
like,
Oh, that really grinds my gears.
so like it is crazy. I mean, how many people I've met that have an eating disorder, just people like I've known my whole life, and they'll come out and say, "Hey, I've been struggling with this, with binging and purging," or I've been fasting for a week, or
Hmm.
like, or and not just in terms of like a short-term thing, but it's something they've been struggling with for years, with
Yeah.
their weight and their body image. And it is like really common. And like I think especially with men it's even harder, because it's like
It's
it's just people don't really assume that it's something that men struggle with too, especially with like
yeah.
say anorexia or binging and purging.
Hmm. Yeah, I have two good guy friends that I met in treatment this year, actually, and there's more of them than you think there are, but they are definitely silenced when it comes to talking about that sort of thing, body image and weight and all the other things that can contribute to an eating disorder. I saw like some statistic just the other day. I don't want to like talk too much about like weight. I know weight
Mm-hmm.
isn't really an indicator of whether you have an eating disorder or not, but I saw a statistic like 3% of people who have eating disorders are underweight. And
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know I don't know how trustworthy that source was, but I think I'm reading this book by a dietitian who grew up in an abusive home, and she had a fucked up relationship with food, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super far into it yet. So, but yeah, you just never know, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like I've struggled with it I mean, my anorexia kind of started when I was, around like 15 or 16, but it's like
Hmm.
the past decade I've struggled with it. And for a good chunk of that, I haven't been underweight. I've been at,
Yeah.
like a healthy weight. So, but I
Yeah.
still
Same.
struggled with it just as much. I mean, right now I'm at a healthy weight and I still struggle with it. Like
Exactly.
it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything, and like we're smart people, we are educated, we are vastly familiar with the world of eating disorders, and I feel like at least for me, I still have to tell myself I'm valid if I'm not underweight. It's
Hmm.
it's just so difficult. Like that's how brainwashed we are by society.
Yeah, and I mean the really fucked up part is that I mean it's really never enough.
Oh, no,
I mean
never.
even if you are underweight, you don't see yourself that way.
Exactly.
So it's you just can't win.
You can't win.
Um
It's like you were saying, you don't know how to stop losing weight.
mhm.
It's definitely addictive in nature. Whatever reason you do it for. I mean, it's really hard to talk about eating disorders on here because I have an eating disorder, a lot of my guests also have eating disorders
Mhm.
just because of the circles I move in online. And what I've found is that almost no two stories are alike. Like everyone shares similarities,
Yeah.
but the more people I talk to, the more I realize, wow, like everyone is so different. Like the reasons are different, the methods are different, the treatment's different. Like it's just so hard to generalize when it comes to something like eating disorders.
Yeah, it really is.
I don't remember what point I was building to, but with that.
You're good. I feel like I mean, just for me, I've never had a healthy relationship with food. I have no idea what that means. And I just feel like a lot of people don't. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's so
so
true. It's like when you get out of treatment for an eating disorder and then you're hanging out with your normie friends and they're all talking about dieting. It's like, "Oh my God, is this just
mhm.
gonna permeate my life forever? Am I just gonna have to be
Yeah.
okay with this?"
And in a way, like that's unfortunately how it has to be. Like you have to
Yeah.
learn how to be okay with it, which not saying I've learned that yet, but
Well, not okay with it, but you navigate it in a way that
yeah.
doesn't make you miserable, or I don't know. I mean, so you with your writing, you talk about it. You found a healthy outlet for that. Tell me about your diagnosis 5 years ago and how that all started.
It's kind of like it's almost hard to completely remember. Like I remember I like went to several psychiatrists and I ended up going to this clinic. It's kind of like almost like a walk-in and there's just a bunch of psychiatrists who work there and I don't even remember what I was trying to get help for. I guess maybe I was struggling with depression. I'm not sure. Like I feel like a lot of my depression growing up was just circumstantial for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's really no way to know for sure.
But someone diagnosed you.
Yeah, so they were trying to, put me on these different antidepressants, like I was put on like 4 or 5 and they were all just making it worse. And so finally they asked me, "Have you ever experienced like mania or like hypomania?" And they were, asking me if I had like this symptom or that symptom and I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, "Yeah, like I guess like I can be very impulsive, I can get very irritable, I just little things and it's like, I just kind of got slammed with this diagnosis really fast. And so they put me on a mood stabilizer and I just kind of figured, it didn't make me worse. So I figured, I guess it's working. But it's like at the same time, around the time that I took the mood stabilizer, I went through a lot of trauma. So like I just had no way of knowing whether it was truly working or not. So I just kind of went along with it and I ended up seeing my current psychiatrist that I see now and I've been seeing him for like about 4 or 5 years. And, I told him, yeah, like I'm on this mood stabilizer. I'm bipolar. And he's like, okay, like I will continue to prescribe you that. And he kind of asked me a few questions and, I was just kind of convinced for a while, like, yeah, this is what I was diagnosed with. This is what I have.
You trusted the professional.
Yeah. And so, he trusted me with that. And I just kind of went on for the past 5 years, just taking this mood stabilizer. And then about 2 years ago, I was put on an antipsychotic because my like OCD tendencies were getting really, really bad, to where it was really interfering with my life. Like I just felt like I was kind of going crazy.
Do you want to talk about that a little? I don't know if we talked about it a ton last time.
I don't think we did.
I know it's something you went through because just from reading your posts.
Hmm.
How long has that been going on?
Well, I've always had like OCD tendencies growing up where, like hoarding is actually like a form of OCD. Like I would hoard really weird stuff, and I also just I don't know, there were just a lot of different things, but it was never bad enough to where I felt like I needed like medication for it. And then when I started like binge drinking a lot and my drinking got really, really bad when I was around like 21 to 23 or whatever, it reached a point this one semester where it got so crazy. Like the binge drinking was making my anxiety worse.
Yeah.
So that was making my OCD worse, or like I don't know if I have, I don't know, the tendencies were getting worse to where it's like I was paranoid. I felt like I needed to touch everything a certain amount of times. I felt like I had to get up like a certain amount of times to before I could eat my food, and had to warm it up a certain amount of times. And I would, be waiting to take the bus to go to class because I took public transportation, and then I'd think, oh shit, like I need to go check the door again, so I'd
Yeah.
miss class to go check the door and just stuff like that.
Sounds like all your mental illnesses working in tandem to fuck up your life.
Yeah, pretty much. And so I went to him, and like he knew that I don't respond well to SSRIs. And I was already on a benzo at the time. I was on Clonopin, and he's like, well, I can put you on this antipsychotic. It's called Vraylar. It doesn't have, it's a weight neutral drug, because he knew that I struggled with an eating disorder. So he knew I wouldn't take anything that would cause weight gain. Like I just wouldn't take it. And so he kind of put me on that as like a last resort, I guess. From hindsight, I realized that I really didn't need to be on the antipsychotic. It was mainly just my drinking, which was making it so bad, was because I was just totally fucking up my brain chemistry, And so like more recently, I don't know, like I talked to him a lot, about just my concerns and my doubts and current things that I've been dealing with and struggling with. And we kind of went over, my family history, my mental health growing up, and he ended up diagnosing me with ADHD. And so we're kind of in the process of tapering off the mood stabilizer. And then since I was on a really low dose of the antipsychotic, I just stopped taking that, which started on Monday. So it was about 5 days ago that I stopped taking the antipsychotic.
Wow, that's so recent.
Yeah, so it's been just a weird week.
How do you
But
feel with your new diagnosis of ADHD?
I feel like it just makes so much more sense. Like I feel like I can actually identify with it, like I hear other people's stories, like especially because it's a lot of times it looks really different in women than it does in men.
What do you mean?
I think a lot of women, because there are kind of like two subtypes of ADHD. You have like the hyperactive subtype, which is kind of the stereotype that a lot of people think of
Yeah.
with ADHD. And then there's the inattentive subtype. And like a lot of women have the inattentive subtype. So, they tend to be kind of, I don't know, described as like, daydreamers or
Okay, it's funny you say that because that's actually one thing I wanted to talk to you about. I was like doing my homework again before this, and I read your post about maladaptive daydreaming, and
yeah.
I'm very interested in that. I actually was supposed to do an episode like 2 years ago about it, but the guest like backed out or something. But yeah, for people who don't know what that is, could you just explain it in a nutshell?
I'm not totally sure how. I'll try. I think like maladaptive daydreaming is like, it's not like an official thing that you can be diagnosed with, but it is like recognized in the like, psychiatric community. And it's almost just like really kind of severe chronic daydreaming, basically, where it really does kind of interfere with your life too. Like, I mean, everyone daydreams to some extent, or at least
Right.
maybe not everyone, but like, I mean,
Most people.
yeah, I think most people. There's always an exception.
I guess it looks different for people.
Yeah. I feel like there are people who really kind of like almost dissociate into their daydreams.
Just like lose connection with reality.
Yeah, like where they're creating like a whole different life in their head, half the
Hmm.
time. Or like for me, it kind of looked like, as a kid, I daydreamed a lot.
Yeah.
So it's like I would create this whole different life for myself where I was imagining that I had friends and I looked this way and my parents were like this and or it's like if I was listening to music or if I watched a movie, it just kind of like fueled my daydreaming and
Oh
it
my
gave me new
God, yes.
ideas. And so like it was just to the point where like people would notice and they'd wave their hand in front of my face like, hey, are you there? Or my teachers would, during a parent teacher conference, like I had several teachers say, like she's not like a bad student, she's just always daydreaming, during
Mm.
class, like we can't get her to focus.
I think, well, okay, I have a confession. I used to be super, super, super into Lord of the Rings when I was like young, and I would
Mm-hmm.
like daydream about it all day long. I would make up characters. I would pretend I was like an elf or whatever and run
Yeah.
around in the woods and all this stuff. And there was a point where it started interfering with my real life, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would rather be in that fantasy world than hanging out with the friend down the street or whatever, or
Yeah.
and I can like I feel like that's not the weirdest thing for kids, but I think there's definitely a point where you can take it a little too far and use it as an escape. Would you say that's the case for you?
Yeah. It's like hard, it's one of those things where I don't feel like it's been really studied a lot, but
Yeah.
like there's a subreddit for it. It's called maladaptive daydreaming. And like a lot of, people kind of talk about like that's kind of how they dealt with their trauma was they kind of lost themselves in these daydreams basically in
Yeah.
this alternate reality.
Do you feel
Um
like because people would discourage that, do you feel like that pushed you toward other coping mechanisms?
I'm not sure.
I'm just
Um
like, I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud because, like, I know at least in my case, like, people, when you've always got your head in a fantasy world, like, people kind of, they either made fun of me or they would, like, be like, why can't you just snap out of it? And you
mhm.
learn as a child that that is not very condoned. Other people, like adults, don't want you to live in a fantasy world. And so you
Yeah.
learn to suppress that side of yourself. And in many cases, I can imagine that would turn to things like eating disorders and substance abuse and that sort of thing. I'm just, again, thinking out loud here.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Like, I mean, it's definitely like something that for me, it was discouraged, like people wanted me to be present, and I
Yeah.
wasn't, I'd rather be in my head, kind of in my own alternate reality. And so
Yeah.
it's like when I didn't have that to cope, I, and it does make sense when I think about it, because it's like,
Hmm.
especially when I talked about, my binge eating earlier after I kind of like hit puberty, not
Yeah.
not really saying that puberty was the reason, but it's like that's kind of where, you know,
Doesn't help.
yeah, it doesn't help. But like I do remember that's where like because it's like a lot of the concerns, from my teachers were between, first grade to fourth grade. And then I kind of started binge eating because my mom was like,
Hmm.
Becca, like, you got to get it together. Your grades are, really shitty. Like, you need to focus in class. And I'm not really saying, like, I mean, it's just interesting that you
Oh,
brought that up,
yeah. I'm just like,
Um,
I think it is interesting. Like, because at the beginning, when we were talking, I was asking you where it stemmed from and whatever. And it seems kind of random until you start digging into these prior events and other factors that went on before you developed your eating disorder. And so when you
mhm.
think about it, it's like, okay, it's not that surprising that I would do this. It actually makes a whole lot of sense on a psychological level.
Yeah. Just trading one coping mechanism for another.
So I feel like I'm okay. So you found out about your misdiagnosis, and that was
hmm
5 days ago?
I know that was like 2 weeks ago.
Still 2 weeks ago. That's really
Yeah,
fresh.
yeah, it is really fresh. It's been like really, I don't know, just a lot of different emotions about it. Like at first,
Yeah.
I think I was just relieved because I was like, yeah, this fits me a lot more. Like this
Hmm.
makes so much more sense. I'm gonna get on the right medication. Like I'm gonna get the right treatment. I'm getting off of these meds like that I never needed. And then I just started kind of, I think, getting really hard on myself, kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
how did you not address this sooner or figure this out sooner? Like, why did you wait so long when, that diagnosis never felt right to you?
Well, okay, so
And
there's a couple things I wanted to ask about before we say goodbye. And
mhm,
it's just so you talked about doubt earlier,
mhm,
um, and how you've been kind of doubting. And I wanted to ask about that. But also, at the beginning of this, you said, you were always changing, or,
mhm,
you were going through a change. And I think it's important to know to accept that we will always be changing. Like there's always going to be things we don't know about ourselves. And that's the whole point of life, is just to keep finding out those things about ourselves until we die.
mhm.
So I guess my question to you would be like, what did that doubt look like at first? And what would you do it differently if you could?
Like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of doubt?
Like, for me, when I grew up super, super Christian, and I always had a lot of doubt, but it would come up as like stomach aches or like
Mhm,
headaches, and I would just push it down because I didn't want to doubt. It was just like an icky feeling. And I was wondering if for you, because you said you had a feeling there was something off, like the meds weren't
mhm.
working like they were supposed to. Did you ever voice those concerns with authority figures? Like
Um,
outright say like, hey, there's something wrong here.
no, I didn't. I think I just was so kind of I was dealing with so much like madness at the time, kind of with trying to self-medicate, that I just couldn't even really, I didn't have the mental capacity to even really focus on that. Like I just, there was so many other things that I really needed to tackle first, I
Oh, of
think.
course. And also you trusted them.
Yeah, and I
Or at
trusted
least you want to
them.
trust them.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming you at all, by the way. I don't want it to come across as like victim blaming. I just
No, you're good. But yeah, I did have just I started to get a really weird gut feeling, especially, reading through my old posts where I was talking about, the medication I was on or my diagnosis. And I was just like, it's really weird it's like once I really got public about it, I was just
Mhm.
kind of like, like, and there were just a lot of different kind of things I feel like that kind of factored into like the doubts, and I don't know,
It's intense.
it is. It was just really strange. And I like had no idea what to really feel. I was really nervous, talking to my psychiatrist about that. And I thought that he wouldn't believe me or he'd say, oh well, that's something like a bipolar patient would say, is that they don't have it, like that's but he was just very open-minded about it. And he's a good psychiatrist
He
basically.
sounds like
So
a great person,
yeah, he is. Like,
someone you can trust because he trusts you.
yeah, which I'm surprised that he does because I feel like I've lied to him a lot, especially about like my substance abuse and stuff like that. Like, I didn't really open up to him about that until like this past year. And that's when I became really honest about that. And um, I think he struggled with it himself. So he was
Hmm.
really understanding and he wasn't like, well, I'm not going to treat you anymore, or something like that.
Exactly.
But yeah, I love him. He's not really the type who just forces meds down my throat, like, or he doesn't. I don't know. He just tries to work with me.
That's how you hope they all will be.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of horror stories where people are like, I wanted to get off this medication, and my psychiatrist like literally won't let me. They won't tell me how to taper off of it. Like stuff like
Yeah.
that, where people are kind of being like coerced into like taking medication that they don't want to
Ugh,
be on.
it's so
So
terrifying because when you're a
yeah.
young person getting into this whole world, you're really at their mercy. Not just the
Mhm.
doctors, but the authority figures in your life. Like you don't really have agency or you don't have knowledge. And not only do you not have knowledge, but a lot of times you're just not capable. You're so in the thick of it. You just
Yeah.
can't deal with it.
Mhm.
Um, I'm looking at your post right now, your most recent one, and at the end you said you're anxious, somewhat excited, and grieving. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
I just feel like it's not really something I've felt like until recently, kind of like this sense of grief just about, especially now that I'm turning 25. I just feel like honestly, like my 20s really were shitty. They
Mhm.
sucked. I never want to relive them. um, like some people talk about it being the best time of your life. And for me, I
Fuck
mean,
that.
fuck that. Yeah. And so I think, being on, these especially just being on the psychotic in particular, like knowing that, I was on this drug that I never needed to be on, it bothers me because like antipsychotics really aren't that good for you, especially if you don't, absolutely need them. Like I feel like, maybe it kind of muted me emotionally. I just feel like over the past, year or two that I've taken it, I just don't really have normal emotional reactions to things. And I always blamed that on, the substance abuse and stuff like that. Like maybe that
Mhm.
has depleted my brain chemistry and I'm just all sorts of fucked up. I don't know.
I mean, and nothing stems from just one source either,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And that's like something I'm coming to accept too, is that I'm just never gonna know. But I do think, a lot of people who take or have taken antipsychotics talk about how it kind of makes them feel like a zombie in a way. And, I don't know if I totally felt like a zombie, but sometimes I just wonder if I would have experienced like more highs and lows had I not been on it.
Yeah.
Um, like I remember learning, a few months ago, my great grandma had a heart attack and she's alive, thank God. But when I heard that, when my mom called me and told me that, I just had no reaction at all. I was just kind of
Mm.
like, oh, I would normally have like this jolt in my heart, kind of like, oh my God. But
Yeah.
it just didn't really affect me at all whatsoever. And there were like a lot of other things kind of like that where it's just like I didn't really seem to be bothered by anything.
Did you feel guilty for that?
Deep down, yeah, like I kind of felt like, am I a sociopath or something?
And
Like,
that makes
what's
me
going
so
on?
sad that you think it's something wrong with you when it's this thing being introduced into your body. And also that what,
Yeah.
who's to say what's right or wrong? It's just, it's so complicated. Everything is so
Mm-hmm.
complicated.
It is.
Hot take.
Uh, but yeah, like, so I think, I'm excited to, be getting the right treatment. I'm anxious because I don't know how long it's really going to take for me to start to feel normal again, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And I'm also just kind of grieving the fact that, there's just a lot of shit that I don't know, like, especially just with my substance abuse too. Like,
Mm.
I just missed out on so much, I guess. And, I know at the same time, it's like the past is the past. But,
Yeah.
I think I used to just say that way too much to where I just didn't let myself really feel any of my
Grieve.
feelings. Yeah. Like, and now
Yeah.
I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, it's not like I'm like wallowing in the past. I just need to feel what I feel about it and move on.
Exactly.
So,
And you can learn from it. I always say, like, the only thing you should ever regret is not learning from your mistakes. Like, everything else that happened, like, I don't think, like, it happened. There's nothing you can do about it, but just, like, do yourself a favor and try to not repeat the same mistake. I mean, I say that having
yeah.
repeated my mistakes millions of times.
No, like it's true though. Like you have to take what you can gather from those experiences and try to use it to refine who you are today.
Yeah, and it's kind of beautiful that you found that out. Like, we're still young, like
Hmm.
we it's been kind of fucked up, but you're about to turn 25 and you're moving forward with this new information, and it's like a new beginning, and that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Does it make you feel like nervous?
um Not really. Like I'm just one of those people where I don't really, I mean, maybe I'll feel differently when I start to look old. But like I don't mind getting older. I think it's, I'm just kind of grateful that I am getting older because, a lot of people don't get to turn 25. So that's kind of the way
Yeah.
that I see it.
I just turned 29 last year of my 20s. I'm so fucking done. I'm so ready. I'm so ready to go into my 30s.
Yeah,
Honestly, it's like when people talk fondly about high school. It's like, shut up.
I know. I'm like, what do you mean? Cannot relate.
That's just me being bitter though. Do you have anything else you wanted to say before we end this?
I guess if there's one thing I can say, it's just that, even if you're like not currently in recovery or you don't feel like you're totally dealing with your shit, like it's okay to just be open about your experience. Like that alone can help somebody. At
Yeah.
least, so like it's okay to speak up. Like in a way, you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for other people. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my little message.
I agree
So
100%. Oh, I just realized that I say 100% a lot, and that's one way that I express black and white thinking. I'm trying not to say it so much, it just comes out. Like nothing is 100%, but I agree 100%.
yeah, I'm like that with the word. I'm always like, for sure. And like I'll
Yeah.
like listen to myself and I'm like, gosh, I've said that like 5 times. And
How
like,
sure is it, Becca? How sure is it?
yeah, I know.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Again, I really, really, really
Yeah.
appreciate it and enjoy talking with you. And oh, tell the listeners where they can find you on the gram.
Okay, you can find me on it's Red's 2 a.m. thoughts, REDS 2 a.m. thoughts. So yeah.
Cool. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
Everyone should go follow you now and have some of those thoughts.
Yeah, just read me whenever you're like up late at night, you can't sleep, just go on that account and read all my bullshit.
Hell
So
yeah. Well, have a great night. Maybe you'll go to sleep early. Maybe you'll have some 2 a.m. thoughts, but whatever happens,
maybe.
I hope you are able to be gentle with yourself and find something to be excited about.
Oh, thank you. I think I will. I have hope.
Hell
So
yeah. All right. Good
awesome.
night. Thanks.
Good night.
Bye. Hey guys. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pickles and Vodka. If you could relate to anything we talked about, you can follow the podcast at Pickles and Vodka Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook by typing in Pickles and Vodka Podcast. You can also email me at picklesandvodkapodcast@gmail.com if you have any stories or if you just want to say hi. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Stay safe.